Yeah, I mean, it's a simple thing. All right, Elaine Ranieri, McElvey Ranieri, number 3, third child of Pope and Emma McElvey. So yeah, they would have a terrible time. So we got together, we did it, Pope and Doug and I, and we took cards. They were about this big. I can see them now. It was a card about this big, and we wrote everybody's name on it, and we got string, and we hung it. Each person had a big sign that had their name on it. And they came home, and it was great. I mean, they had a great sense of humor, both of them, and just loved it. Laughed and laughed and laughed. But yeah, we did. You're right.
And she still couldn't call us by the right name.
She still didn't, even with the sign on. It's the truth.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Paige was going to tell us the story.
Paige, let's Paige.
Yeah.
No.
Elaine's in the chair. Let her tell the story.
Go ahead, Paige. Go ahead. That's fine. That's
Elaine.
fine.
So I thought I would tell. This is later in my life. Now we asked for things that really had an impact on you when you were growing up, and one of the things that I remember that had a huge impact on me happened to me in high school. I was a senior in high school, and I don't know about when you guys were seniors, but when I was that year, Father Powell, you remember Father Powell? Oh yeah. Father Powell brought each senior, well there were only 36 of us, into his office and would ask you, what your plans were and talk to you about the future and what was going to happen and where you were going to go. And it was this week that he called all of us into his office. And to tell you the honest truth, I hadn't thought about it. I loved high school. I was involved in student council. I was involved in all kinds of things, and I enjoyed it. And I certainly didn't have any aspirations of answering my phone. I hadn't thought about going to college. And to tell you the truth, and Bob just said it, I guess in my mind, I thought, I didn't know what I'd do, but I'd get married and I'd have kids. I mean, that's what I would do. I feel like that Mother raised me to be a mother. That was kind of the feeling that I had. And I don't think you all know, we talked about Mother being naive, but I was talking to Beth yesterday, and Beth was telling me that her mother did not tell her any facts of life. That when she was about, 13, that Susan and Beth and I were together, and she told us, she didn't know anything. And we told her the facts of life. But that's because Mother talked to us, and she certainly talked to me. And you would be surprised some of those conversations we had in her little bathroom. She would be I remember her putting on her makeup and talking to me. And she talked to me she talked to me about sex and the facts of life, but she talked to me about being a good wife. She talked to me about how important sex was. She talked to me about how important it was and she would always come from the point of view of her, because that's what she could do something about, that it was hard for a man to be faithful. It's hard for anybody to be faithful, but it was hard for a man to be faithful. And if you did not satisfy him and take care of him, then it was even harder. And you're putting him in a compromising position. She had these conversations with me, and she wasn't all that naive. And so, this was what I was, that's what I was prepared for. And not that she expected of me, but I expected it. I loved being y'all's mother. I loved it. I love taking care of you. And
Some of it.
and Kitty says to this day that when I left home, she had to have therapy because she thought her mother had deserted her. So anyway, Father Powell calls me in his office. Now, I can see this to this day. I walk in his office. He is sitting, his office has a bank of windows facing the street. What was that? Is Adams Avenue. And his chair, he's turned around looking out the window. So when I walk in, I see the back of his head. And he turns around, and we're going to talk about my future. And he turns his chair around, and he looks at me, and he says, "Have you ever thought about being a nun?" And I wanted to go, "Hell no." And that could have been my first response, but he just waited. And I went, "Oh." And at that moment, I knew that's what I was going to do. I mean, I knew that's what I was going to do. It's like, I remembered having, I don't know how old I was when I was sent over to the convent. You remember the convent was across the street where the elementary school was. Beautiful, big, old Southern building. And I remember walking in the front door of that convent and opening the door. And the energy in that place, it was like so peaceful. It touched a part of me that I knew was something special and pure and good. And I wanted that, you know? And I thought they had it. and when I was sitting in Father Powell's office looking at him and he said that to me, that came back to me. And you know, I used to go to church every day. I would walk from our house to St. Bede's Church. Yes, I did. Remember St. Bede's when it was, I would walk from our house in the morning, get up early, and walk and go to St. Bede's Church and go to Mass in the morning.
Every day?
Just about every day. In the morning before I'd come back and get ready and go to school.
Was it much closer than it is today?
No, oh, not that St. Bede's. It was.
I'm just sitting here and I'm going, no. It's a long walk where McDonald's is.
It's where McDonald's is. But that was still a little walk. Anyway, and I loved it. I loved that connection. And you know what? Our mother, that woman had an incredible inner life.
Mm-hmm. She did.
And she would kneel in that church, and I remember looking at her, and it used to kind of bother me because I'd think, come, people, really? She was almost in a trance. You remember she would pray, and she would almost be in a trance. She would get so connected. And though I was sort of embarrassed by that, I knew something was going on and I wanted some of it, you know? But so when he said that to me, for some reason, have you ever thought about being a nun? Even though my first response was, hell no, I'm going to be a mother. Don't you get that? You know, I'm going to be somebody's wife. I'm going to have a family. I spent hours in there crying because I knew what it meant. I knew that I loved my family, and I was so attached to my family. And I knew when you do that, you have a new family, and that becomes your life. And I just would sob. I remember sitting in his office just sobbing. And finally I came to terms with it. And I said, okay, but I didn't want to be a Sister Loretta. I really didn't. And you know what I wanted to do is everybody that's told a story before me has talked about how growing up in Montgomery had such an impact on them. Well, I saw colored and white water fountains, and I didn't think it was just the way it was. From a child, I don't know why, it caused me such pain. I just couldn't handle it. And I saw people in the back of the bus, and I understood, and it was painful to me. And I took Florence home once too, and I tried to get her to sit in the front, and she wouldn't. And she explained why. And she told me how dangerous it was if I drove into that neighborhood, because I took her home and she was in the front seat. For it was dangerous for her, and it was dangerous for me. And I remember the bus boycott. And Mother and Daddy protected us from it. And at the time, I didn't understand it. Only later I knew what happened. But I remember vividly not being allowed to ride the bus. I remember when I was in high school, one of the things why I was drawn to the convent, we had this retreat. And the priest that gave the retreat was at the black church in Selma, Alabama. And he talked about what it was like, and he put some things out there. And that was when I was a senior in high school. So now I'm going to decide on this order, and I felt the need to make restitution, I think. So I looked for an order that did work.